Sounds good. Yeah. So my name is Christaan Felber, and the piece I wrote is called "Beasts Live Where Flowers Grow." And here's the first couple paragraphs from that. I'm in a whitewashed prison of my own design. I sit waiting for a moment of clarity to take me over and possess me. I wanted to take hold and latch on like a rabid dog, to shake me around like a rag doll and drag me in any direction. The pain isn't within the bite itself, it's the waiting for the moment those sharp teeth sink perfectly into my soul. There's a comfort in the feeling of warm blood pulsating out of me and knowing that it's mine. The more time that passes, the more I anticipate the bite, and that time is irreplaceable. It's the most valuable currency we have. Once it's gone, there's no getting it back. I think about this obsessively. The ironic part is, as a photographer, I spent most of my life in a job freezing moments for other people, yet my own life is flowing helplessly between my fingers. It doesn't matter how much I try and take hold of it and squeeze it, it just changes shape, sneaks through the fissures of my hands and flows down my elbow where it drips onto the ground beneath me where the flowers grow. In the meantime, I let my mind wander into realms of dreams and alternate realities that may or may not exist. I see the permutations crawl their branches across my consciousness like ice freezing the outside of a pane of glass. They splinter off in seemingly random directions, and I follow them. I follow each road as it's built, stone by stone, off into the distance to entire empires, to entire civilizations that move and grow and vibrate. Much like the societies we navigate during our waking lives, yet they're hidden from nearly everyone, sometimes even ourselves. Of course, all of these paths and ultimate designs are built somewhere between reality and fantasy, put together using the cement and cobblestones of past experiences and current fears. However, even with this awareness, I can't help but be drawn down the paths like flowery sirens pulling and guiding me to my grave. They squirm and weave their way through a countryside of bright, iridescent ferns and jungles, filled with creatures that stare out from the thick darkness. They are silent, but I can feel them waiting or watching intently, with their beady eyes that don't seem to blink, just stare out radiantly like little moons. I know I must be walking, but my vision doesn't bob up and down to the cadence of steps. It instead floats seamlessly, like getting pulled through space by the invisible thread of fate that's been wrapped around my waist a long time ago. The trees and foliage that frame my vision are blurred and move at a slower pace than the center of my vision. There's a meditative effect to this singular focus that allows my mind to enter a state of hypnosis, where my peripherals become mere abstraction within the context of greater cause. The crisp, prickling sounds of creatures scurrying through the jungle's underbrush do their best to distract me. But I have no time for distractions. I'm on a mission from God. Well, this was actually my first time really writing like a memoir in this kind of way. And that, like, I think previous to this, I'd always been writing journals. I've been journaling since I was probably 14, maybe even earlier. And at some point, I just realized that as great as it was to journal, that it's possible to take that same energy, I guess, and that same sort of self-awareness and put it into something that is entertaining or kind of mold it into something else that is a little bit more palatable, as opposed to just kind of journaling, which becomes more self-indulgent. And for me, I think that this ties into the process of journaling in that for me, it's a way of understanding myself and understanding what brought me here to my current place. So this was written, pretty recently, just a couple months ago. I mean, really, it's obviously the world has gone through a lot this past year. I've definitely been through a lot. For me, this was mostly about what the state of depression is like, and again, just trying to figure out how I got here, and maybe trying to look back in the past and draw correlations between the past and the present, just to better understand my current depressive situation. So this kind of started off as like a couple, actually started off as 3 separate stories that were written at different times. I mean, it was all within probably like a month of each other, so it all kind of has that very similar perspective and similar theme. But they were kind of, again, they were written separately, and when I talked to the editor from the review, she recommended putting them together, and I thought it was a good idea. So I kind of patched them together, and I added a paragraph between the second and third story to kind of create a more seamless transition and turn it into one whole piece. But the actual writing, again, felt very stream of consciousness. It just kind of flowed out. There wasn't necessarily any outline created, which I think you can get away with in a short story. But now that I want to write something longer, I realized like I have to plan ahead a lot more and kind of outline things. Whereas this was sort of put together, fairly easily. And again, that's something I think you can get away with, I'm sure. Again, it's probably over the course of maybe a couple of months. Again, I was just sort of going through a difficult time, and most of the time I was writing from bed. And there's actually, I talk about that in the actual piece. But it's probably over the course of, I don't know, a couple months of, I was writing journals, and then I started reading a lot of poetry. I was reading Charles Bukowski and Dylan Thomas, and I was like, okay, let me try to put my journaling through the filter of poetry, but that didn't feel right. And then I was like, okay, well, let me try to put this through the filter of short stories, and that's felt a lot better. And so yeah, it was about over the course of about 2 months, I would say. I guess I'd try to be as honest and vulnerable as possible, because I don't think anyone can really argue with that. And I think especially now, where everyone is, everything is kind of moved via social media, and I think everyone kind of creates this, I don't want to say like false identity, but a lot of the time it feels a bit like a facade of who we are, and we don't typically explore anything deeper, or maybe more dark or vulnerable that everyone is going through, but we just don't talk about. And I think that there's a freshness in being honest and being vulnerable that I think people can relate to. Actually, I just finished reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, and I think it's more semi-autobiographical novel, but it's pretty close to memoir. And I thought it was really incredible, and I thought it was incredibly brave of her to write it. And obviously the reason, I'm sure everyone knows about her, but the reason I read it was because she also kind of went through a lot of depressive states, and she wrote about it in an incredibly brave and honest way, especially in that time. I think it was the 1960s that she wrote that, and especially as a woman, I think it took a lot of strength and courage to write something that was just so honest. And not to mention her actual writing is just phenomenal. It's so well paced. Her analogies, her metaphors are brilliant, and it really gives an accurate insight into the process that she was going through, which was incredibly difficult. And it's hard to not feel moved after reading it. Yeah, I mean, I would love to give a shout out to the Dillydoun Review who published this. Again, it was my first time publishing anything, so I'm glad that they took a chance with me, and it gave me sort of a fire to write more. Maybe the feeling of being validated felt pretty good. So like, all right, I'm gonna write it some more. Continue doing this. So thank you, and thank you to yourself as well for reaching out and doing this interview. It means a lot.